إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is Kamaruddin speaking from ICU UK. I've been doing some research about lunar standstill in the UK over past 40, 50 years. And I've found some interesting information, and I'd like to share this data with our viewers today so that maybe there is some learning point that we will find it useful to help us resolve some of the difficulties we have faced in the past. The major lunar standstills in our time were in 1987, 2006, 2025, and in future it will again come 2043 and few years around it. But there are some background information that took place in 1984 and also an incident happened in 1999. I would like to share with you. So let's go to the first topic. The Muslims in UK were following different countries in the 70s. And so many scholars decided how can we resolve the differences and unite. So a conference was organized in Regent Park Mosque in London. It used to be run by Egyptian embassy in the 70s, but in the 80s it was run by the Saudi embassy, and the diplomat of Saudi embassy, Dr. Ahmed Dubian, was the chair at the time. He just newly arrived, and he was found himself that many of the Arabs were following Saudi Arabia, and all the Asians were following other countries, including Morocco. So how can they all unite on one criteria? Because um, Regent Park Mosque at the time was considered as the national mosque of the UK, and everybody looked up to it as the leader. So conference held in 1984, over 350 scholars from all over the world attended it. And after they reviewed the background information and the difficulties, they said, right, if you are unable to do a local site in the UK because of all the difficulties of clouds and not being able to see it for whatever reasons, then you can go to a nearby country when the moon is above the UK horizon. And if you receive it in a Sharia compliant way, then you can act upon it. So the condition was the moon should be on the UK horizon, and that means moon set after sunset. And this is consistent with the Quran, Surah Shams, by the sun and its brightness, by the moon as it follows the sun. So sun sets and then moon become visible, then moon sets. This is explained in Tafsir ibn Kathir. So, so far so good. This was their advice. And all the uh, people of different backgrounds agreed to that. So the Deobandi Maslak people were Jamiat Ulama, Hizbul Ulama, and others. And the Barelwi scholars, I think Tablighul Islam Mosque in Bradford was their center. They, all the Barelwi Hazrat Sunni Mosque agreed to that criteria. And all the Arabs also agreed to that. So they would follow news by naked eye, provided it was possible to be seen on the UK horizon, or it was above the UK horizon. And later on, I think um, Balam Masjid also stuck to that criteria for a while. Now, where can you get Sharia compliant news? Because one of the conditions is that anybody who does local sighting, they are following their own sighting, then you can borrow it from them, Qadi ila Qadi, through a channel or a bilateral agreement. And it was found that Morocco was the nearest country which was doing local sighting and was following according to the Sharia requirement. And because they have large number of people, the group sighting were met. and they were not following the calculations of the new moon conjunction, which was the civil calendar of Saudi Arabia at the time. So it was clear that calculation of the new moon is not to be followed, but sighting by the human eye, muhakkak ruya basari, is to be followed. So that was what everyone agreed. Now, according to the historical account written by Mufti Yusuf Danka from Croydon, and we have the full article on our ICUK website, the whole background was explained in 1985 in a talk given by Mufti Saeed Ahmad Palanpuri from Darul Uloom Deoband, who said the incident took place in the following year of that conference in 1985. It was end of Ramadan, and the news from Morocco came late. And he used to come to a shopkeeper, teletext, and because it didn't come early enough, he closed the shop and went away. I assume a shopkeeper opens at 9 and closes at 9, and if it is not here by 8, 9 o'clock, then he says, I'm going home. So it might have come a half an hour later, 1 hour later, we don't know. And he found it next morning. And when he informed the scholars, they said, well, um, let's break the fast and do it the following day, which will be 2nd of Shawwal. But some other scholars didn't agree because they had some doubts in it and they continued to fast. And this created some kind of ill feeling between and the ulama groups. And so they took the whole problem and went to India um, over next few months. And this was done by um, Maulana Musa Karmadi, I believe, according to his books written in Urdu. And he came back few months later because of that incident. I think some public also got angry and started to become physical. So they were worried that unless this issue is resolved, it might escalate to physical fighting, and that's not good. So they presented their case to Darul Uloom in India, and they gave them permission under the circumstances you may follow Saudi Arabia. So the ulama came back and they held a meeting in Darul Uloom Bari on 28 December 1986. Now, yes, it was a year of lunar standstill, but the altitude of the moon, low altitude, happens during the winter months. And Ramadan and Eid in that year was spring summer. So the news coming late from Morocco in June, 19 June 1985, that was the Shawwal, was easily possible to be seen. Um, 31 hours old moon, 1% 0.8 illumination. And so it was really bad weather. And from a technological point of view, it could be sometimes the machine run out of toner, some now ink, and they say, oh, we need to change it before we send the machine. And that could easily take half an hour or in the worst case, 1 hour. So something went wrong and the news didn't come promptly. And that caused the problem. So it was not the low altitude of the moon of the lunar standstill, but it was in that year where that has happened in the winter. Certainly when they had their meeting in the December 1986, that was the low altitude moon of the lunar standstill. So that's the background why, even though everybody agreed in 1984 to follow moon sighting from nearby location when it is above UK horizon, they still went back. And this group is Jamiat Ulama Hizbul Ulama. Our Sunni Barelwi Hazrat stuck to their gun and said, no, we are not changing. We will follow Aqrabul Bilad, nearest country, and they continue to do that even up to today. So most of the Deobandi Jamaat, because many ulama signed it, they changed to Saudi Arabia. And a big impact was from Dewsbury Marcus, who was having a public engagement from throughout the UK. And they said, in fiqh masla, we follow the ulama. And Jamiat Ulama were a huge supporter of the Dawat and Tabligh effort. And local Jamaat brothers also followed Saudi Arabia. And that's the background. Um, I have just explained that in December the moon is very low altitude and you could easily miss the moon when it is in the southern hemisphere. Okay, now we are coming to lunar still of 1987. So we are already at a time when we have a split in the community. One group following Saudi Arabia and one following Morocco. So Morocco are all these Sunni railway masajid plus a very small number of the Deobandi Masjid with Maulana Yaqub Qasmi Sahib in Dewsbury. So they were sticking to Morocco and others were following Saudi Arabia. What the public didn't know was Saudi Arabia had a dual calendar system, their civil calendar, which is the Ummul Qura, but they would announce for Ibadat by taking sighting reports. And also, what is unknown is that they asked the public to look for the Ramadan or Shawwal moon on the 29th of the Ummul Qura date. Not one visibility-based calendar. And the original criteria was that if the moon age is 12 hours or more at sunset, then the previous day is the first of the month. This criteria often meant that when the month is 30 days long, the 29th day could be before new moon conjunction. So have a think. The lunar year, 6 month 29, 6 month 30. But if you're always looking on the 29th, then if you are about to complete a 30 days month and you get wrong, mistaken witness on the 29th, you could be starting the month before the birth of the moon. And that has happened. So this is the major lunar standstill year of 1987, Ramadan and Shawwal. And because it was in the spring, it was high altitude and on the northern hemisphere and not in the winter. But if you are looking before the birth of the moon, you could miss it even the moon is easily visible when it is supposed to be in the sky. So that's an important point to note. Looking for the moon on the 29th of the Qura calendar could lead to you looking for it before the new moon conjunction if that month was due to complete 30 days. And if you are not having lots of witnesses, one or two witnesses could be mistaken something else and claim they saw the moon. And therefore, you could be starting the month at the beginning of the new moon phase, which is 2.5 days invisible, like 2 days ahead. That is technically possible. Now let's move on to 1999, an incident happened. So since 1986, various ulama group were following Saudi Arabia, CMC, which comprised of Jamiat Ulama and Hizbul Ulama and Darul Ulum. And this was because of the hardship, to ease the hardship. But they thought it was more reliable because it's Haramain Sharifain. So they can't be wrong. They are most God-fearing people. So with that emotional attachment and news coming early by Asr time, well before Maghrib, it was easy. We didn't have to do anything. And there was no need to argue, is it seen or not seen? It comes from the Holy Land. So that's what they were following. However, research carried out later on by Saudi scholars like Dr. Ayman Kordi from King Saud University published a paper in NASA Journal in 2003 when we compared the official declaration of the Saudi Justice Department with the newspaper from the newspaper cutting compared to astronomical data. He found that about 87% of the declaration was made when the moon was not in the sky. So the scientific community were well aware Qura calendar does not match the visibility of the moon. And the Saudi scholar, government also say it is not for religious purpose. It's a civil calendar, so it may not match the visibility-based calendar. But what has happened is that on 17 March 1999, about 7, 8 Darul Uloom students went on the hill outside uh, uh, in uh, in Bury, in Bolton, and they claimed to have seen the moon in a large group. And that took place at that time. There was no much astronomical data available. I mean, I would have had a computer and a DOS program to give that, but nobody would have email to find that information quickly enough. So we have then statement from them on Wednesday, 17 March 1999. All these students who are in their 40s now, nearly 50s, claim to have sighted a moon half an hour before new moon conjunction, half an hour after the moon has set before the sun. And their testimony was accepted, and and then attached to that declaration, Saudi declaration was given that also Saudi Arabia has saw the moon. When did they see the moon? When the moon was not in the sky, one was not even moon, it was the waning moon of the previous month. They claim to have seen the moon on that day. Okay, and this is because the Qura was running the original one about 2 days ahead of visibility. So that we found out afterward. It was this information was not known in the 70s and 80s. We developed that in the 90s. So that is why you will find if you look at historical data, even though Pakistan and Saudi is 2 hours time zone difference, or Saudi and Morocco maybe 2, 3 hours time zone difference, they are 2 days apart. So 2 over 24 is 1 over 12. Only 1 month out of 12 should be different. 11 months should be same because they are neighboring countries. The visibility should match. But in reality, they were 2 days difference instead of 1 month difference out of 12. Now let's move on to the lunar standstill of 2006. Um, Dr. Salman Zafar Sheikh from USA is originally from India, a project manager in Bell TNT Labs, was sent to Saudi Arabia for a 5 years research project, and he was keen to find out where is this Qura, and he searched everywhere in Mecca and couldn't find it, and then eventually found it's calculated in Riyadh. And then he proven in his long paper that the news from Saudi Arabia was unreliable. And even though astronomers go with the telescope, they never use it. And it's only the 2, 3 people from Riyadh, Shakra Sudair, and another place, and they just claim to see the moon, and all other committees report negative sighting. Um, and this year was also a year of major lunar standstill, um, 2006. So in the winter, the moon will be in the southern hemisphere. In the summer or spring, it will be in the northern hemisphere. And after it became known this how this calendar was unreliable, a group of Deobandi scholars who were following Saudi Arabia, Jamiat Ulama, they split from them and form Waifaqul Ulama. So they were this splinter group, and they were struggling to get anybody to join them. Majority of the people have been used to follow Jamiat and Saudi Arabia. They say we can't risk having a day difference, 2 days difference with Saudi Arabia. It creates a social problem. And so they say, look, better to follow sighting of the moon from anywhere in the world than no sighting at all, like birth of the moon. So follow, if we jump to South Africa, 8,000 miles away, that is better than following birth of the moon. So that was a social political decision, and that helped minimize the difference in the winter months. So even the moon set before the sun in UK, even if it's impossible to be seen, they would get the news from South Africa, and that would match with Saudi Arabia. And that way, they were able to get few more imams to join them. Remember, this was only winter time. This difference happened, but in spring, summer, it is normal again. And also note that jumping to Southern Hemisphere went totally against the 1984 criteria, where 350 odd world scholars advised to follow that when the moon is above your own horizon, then and only then you can borrow it from another country. So this was when I joined them in 2008, because I was really pleased that ulama group were going to follow moon sighting rather than the birth of the moon. I worked with them for about 5 years on all our ICUK members, and they say this is an interim solution to educate people, bring them onto moon sighting, and then we'll get back to local sighting, because they were promoting local sighting of Wayfaq ulama, but not defining the boundary. So they would jump to different countries in order to follow a sighting report rather than the Saudi calendar. So that was another method to overcome the difficulty of the major lunar standstill. Now let us come to the current lunar standstill. 2025 is the peak of the lunar standstill, which we have just passed, but it starts a couple of years before and it will continue a couple of years later, a few years around the peak time. We were able to establish local sighting by starting 2 days sighting from Morocco's 29th since 2017, 2018. And then we found that if we were to count from our own sighting, then it fully meets the 29, 30 days of the Sharia. Even though we may be sometimes day after the other countries, or sometimes same, and so occasionally before them. But 29, 30 days are fully met if we followed our own sighting. And a lot of our moon sighters got very excited. We need to promote it on social media and get new people and debate and educate. So I delegated all that to other people to do all the local groups. And I said, when you do the actual sighting, do come back and report it to your regional group and to our website. So majority of the people looking was not trained with optical aids, so they were relying on the naked eye, which is all very good. The problem is in bad weather, sometimes a person with good eyesight may see the moon, but someone with glasses may not see the moon. And you can't guarantee a person with good eyesight every location. So we have permission to use optical aid because the ru'yat still takes place because the moonlight is entering the eye, whether through one lens of your own spectacles or two lens of a binocular. The light is entering the eye, so it is allowed. But some of our brothers feel if we allow that, then it is like following Saudi Arabia because they claim to use optical aids. Anyway, so as you can see, major lunar standstill year. In the winter, it is low altitude, but in the summer, it is high altitude. And with optical aid, you can see on the margin of code B and C. And in the Shawwal in Eid, it was easily seen by naked eye. So even some of us started with optical aid at the beginning of Ramadan. It didn't make our month 28 days like some people claim. We started by naked eye sighting. And this is an important point that lunar month is self-correcting. Even if you make a mistake, it doesn't carry over to all the months to the end of the year. It corrects itself by the end of the month. And now we are coming to a future lunar standstill year. which will happen in 2043, and Ramadan and Shawwal will be in the winter and not in the summer like currently. And this 1987 issue might repeat itself. The news might come late, 10 o'clock, 9:30 sunset, 10:30 easily. You'll have to wait until the report comes in. And so are we going to start panicking and saying this is not practical? We have to go to work 6 o'clock in the morning. What shall we do? Um, so this is a problem that is coming. The previous solution was jumping to foreign countries, but the this solution we have found following different country does not lead to unity for the reason explained. And so is it possible to overcome late news and still stay with local sighting? So this is we have to overcome. So this is the last slide I'm coming to. Um, so how can UK Muslim adopt a method of managing late news without following foreign news? So this is the question we shall discuss in our question and answer session very soon, inshallah ta'ala. So please remember this question. How can we adopt the method of managing late news without following foreign news? Because we have proven that local sighting does work and doesn't break the calendar of 29 and 30 days. And foreign news sometime can be same as us, sometime a day later, or sometime we may be a day before them. But local sighting is proven to work. So we need to find a solution and trial that solution a number of years, maybe from now on, so we don't have this panic and we develop the confidence of the public to move away from foreign news to local news. Here is a proposal. All the fatwas that allowed following foreign news, we've written to them and given them the current last few years observation data, and saying that it is possible to sight the moon and here. And so they said, in that case, it is not permissible for you to follow foreign news. You must follow your own sighting. And there was one fatwa who says um, South Africa is nearer than Morocco and it is 1 hour away. So we should follow South Africa instead of Morocco and all that. That was written in 2007 and 8, I think. So I did some analysis and say that is not true. Islamic calendar is based on sunset difference, nothing to do with GMT difference. Okay, sunset difference. And if we have our sunset in the summer, like now in the UK, it will be winter in South Africa. Their sunset will be early. So we could have 4 or 5 hour sunset difference. So getting the news conveniently has also the drawback that people abandon local sighting because they get the news 4 or 5 hours before. And that is not sunnah. Most certainly, it is not sunnah. So how can we follow a local sighting or without following foreign news and overcome the difficulties? Um, and I believe adopting local sighting can become the ease basis of unity if we can remove the difficulties. Now, one of the difficulties is most of us who go to moon sighting um, also have to come and do our Taraweeh and reciting, listening to the whole Quran. We don't want to miss. And so some people either come quickly or without actually seeing the moon, or they don't go at all because they don't want to miss the Khatam, the Quran. Now, we know from scholars it is not faraz or wajib to start the Khatam from the first night. This was not the practice of Rasulullah SAW. It started from Khulafai Rashidin, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. And it it is done because Jibreel alayhi salam used to revise the whole Quran with Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Ramadan. So Khulafa Rashidin implemented that, and they start usually custom to start from the first night and finish by 27th. So is it possible, and this is open to discussion in our question hour, that if we delay the Khatam Taraweeh from the second the night, from the 29th of um, Shaban, then it will mitigate the effect of any late news, and also people will be encouraged to go out to the sighting without fear of missing first part of the Quran. They could do like they do on 29th or 30th Juzama, they could do the first night, and using that method, we could mitigate the late news. So in summary, seeking unity in difficulty, this is what I have covered. So the old fatwa were based on the question, the istifta, either it is impossible to see the moon in the UK, and if you follow foreign 29th, okay, Saudi or South Africa or Morocco, you might be looking 1 or 2 ahead of your local phase of the moon, so it will be impossible. Or if it is possible, if it's too much cloudy, and you're not going out of your own city wall to a place with a clear view of the western horizon, then you may not see every month. So it will be very difficult to see it, and it may also be very cloudy. And missing the moon, and not necessarily the moon is not in the sky, but it is possible that not enough people are looking to cover most of the area of the country, or if they are looking, they may not have the skills to look in the correct direction. Remember, we didn't have mobile phone and internet and computers in the 80s, so we didn't know that the moon is swinging winter to summer by 100 degrees. South west in the winter all the way to northwest in the summer, and the diameter of the moon is only half a degrees on the horizon, but every month is jumping 10 degrees. So if you are off few degrees, you totally miss the moon. So we didn't have that skill in those days, and nor did you have the manpower and the public looking, and nor were we looking on the correct date. So all these things had added to the problem of jumping to foreign countries. But now, Alhamdulillah, with past 7, 8 years effort, we have overcome most of this. So out of these 8 issues I've listed on this cause-effect analysis or Pareto analysis or fishbone diagram, whatever you want to call it in your management training of change management, we've overcome these difficulties. It is not impossible, it is possible. It may be difficult, but we have developed skills to overcome that difficulties. We have developed a method to overcome cloudiness by having greater coverage using weather forecast and going to clear areas. We have more people looking, hundreds of people looking than few people in the old days, and we are able to cover most of the country. And we have a lot of people with good skills, mashallah, who can use mobile phones and apps and fingers and devices to precisely pinpoint the location of the moon. The only thing appears to be to overcome um, is to ease late news. So if we can deal with the Khatam Taraweeh to the next day of the 29th of Shaban, then that will remove the pressure from people going out, or committees or imams wanting early news to start the Khatam. And also some people who go to nearby cities, they want to know by before Maghrib so they can jump in the car and go. Well, those who go to foreign countries, they go a few days early, but local people like Maulana Ejaz from Dewsbury, he wants to go and do Taraweeh in Huddersfield and he want to know early. So if it is Khatam, then they want to know early. But if we can mitigate that through mutual dialogue, then all these issues which led to us jumping to foreign countries could help us come back to local citing. Um, so before I finish, I want to bring to your attention this formula. Fatwa is equal to text plus context. Now, in the last sermon of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said, I leave behind two things, Quran and Sunnah, and if you follow them, you will not go astray. So if we can follow Quran and Sunnah, that is the local citing, and that will be the original fatwa. But if we have extenuating circumstances, all these listed here, then we are allowed to deviate to foreign countries. So ruling changed. Now, if we overcome these difficulties, and remove that context, then we'll be back to Quran and Sunnah. So any fatwas you have from the 70s and 80s based on these circumstances, we need to get them reviewed, revised, and cancelled so that people don't say that we can follow whichever country we want because we have this fatwa, because those fatwa was for a given situation, and if that situation is not valid, then those fatwa is abrogated. Now, please put your question in the chat box or comment box, and I will stop recording and then take the question. And I'll just do the end slide now. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.